In his piece entitled "Do Black Men Have a Moral Duty to Marry Black Women?", Charles W. Mills presents 6 arguments which have typically been employed against interracial marriages. The argument which Mills finds most relevant involves the question of motivation for marriage. In this section, Mills points out that there are 4 questionable motivations for a black man to marry a white woman. Those are sexual exoticism and forbidden fruit picking, racial revenge, racially differentiated aesthetic attraction, racial status seeking, and personhood by proxy. In our society, it is generally regarded as immoral to enter into marriage for any other reason than romantic love. This question of motivation is deontological by nature and is therefore more difficult to examine than the other grounds for objection to interracial marriage, which tend to be more consequential. How can we ever objectively examine a person's motivation? Furthermore, a person may not be aware of their own motivation. But this question is present in all relationships. It is the question of why do I love this person as opposed to another, and by extension, why does this person love me rather than someone else? The idea of phenomenological unfungibility of persons seems to answer such questions. Each individual has their own set of values, experiences, traits, etc., which make that person qualitatively different from another. Therefore, it seems that a purely motivated marriage would be the result of the right sort of fit between 2 unfungible personalities. The idea that a person would marry for any other reason, such as those earlier named, would be to use that person instrumentally. This would in fact be dehumanizing, as it would deny respect to the other's human dignity. This is, of course, immoral. So the question remains, do black men have a moral duty to marry black women? I believe that the question we arrive at near the base of this one is it possible for a black man to love a white woman in a society that has socialized both of them in a way that can potentially taint their motivations for their love and marriage? Can white women only be seen as a means to an end by black men? Velleman argues that love arrests our own self-love and therefore prevents the use of the beloved as an instrument. The cause for this socialization of thought lies in the typical way of organizing people. In the past, we did this based on physical characteristics. Now, however, it can be argued that these distinctions are of a more socio-economic nature now. Whichever the case, we can use these differently sized drink stars as an example. Typically, we would put these 2 together because they're about the same height, and we would take these 2 and then these 2. We have 3 distinct groups based on the fact that they're the same height. And now we're going to treat this group one way and make assumptions about them, and the same goes for this group and this group too, and we're going to treat them all differently based on these characteristics which we decided were important. Of course, there are distinctions made along lines of race. However, it makes more sense when you organize them in a continuum, like this. When you look at it like this, there's no reason why a person from this part of the continuum could not love a person from this part because of their unique traits, values, etc., which result from being a part of this continuum. Brink argues that by loving those unlike us, we come to know ourselves from a different point of view. I would conclude that all men have a moral duty to marry for the love of a unique and unfungible person, whichever race and ethnic identity that person belongs to. With this duty comes the implicit obligation to know one's own motivations when it comes to matters of love and marriage. To limit the choices of partners for black males to black females would in a sense say that people are fungible, and by the merit of being African American, a black woman could easily replace any other.